So we can start the session, Peter. So hello everyone, good evening all. It's privileged to have Peter in our call, who is a Sitecore MVP. Who will walk us through how to work with Sitecore Forms along with JSS and React. On behalf of SUG Chennai, welcoming Peter for this wonderful webinar. I am very happy to welcome all the participants also for this webinar. So over to you, Peter. We are very excited to hear from you.
Thank you for a nice introduction. Hi everyone, welcome. I'm really happy that I can be here today and talk about some Sitecore JSS and Sitecore Forms topic, how to use them together, how to work with forms, how to work with JSS. So let's begin with a small introduction. I'm Peter Procházka. I work for Accenture for more than 12 years now, out of which 9 years I'm solely working with the Sitecore platform. I'm 5-time Sitecore MVP, technology MVP. I'm experienced ASP.NET, Sitecore, and also SXA developer. I did also some customizations for Sitecore commerce platform. So as you can hear, I was really a hardcore ASP.NET Sitecore backend developer, architect. But for last 2 years, I work as sort of full stack developer, architect, where I'm switching between APIs and doing some usual Sitecore stuff like creating the templates, creating renderings and so forth, and then also working in React together with Sitecore JSS. So really, I did a bit of a change of mindset, also change of the skills, change of the tooling, change of what I'm doing, because also, the world is not always the same. Of course, also for the developers, it's usually that, new things are coming. Nowadays, everybody's talking about ChatGPT, right, and so forth. So, everything is changing. Also, Sitecore is changing from the MVC or ASP.NET MVC. Also, you are more or less currently just consuming APIs on the front-end part, and really the front-end developers are creating everything by themselves. It's not anymore the world where you are, as a front-end developer, creating HTML and CSS and then just pushing it to the backend developer who implements the CS HTML files, right, at the end. So really we need to also think about how we change, how we progress, how we learn some new stuff, because also Sitecore as a platform itself is changing. So we need to be prepared. XM Cloud is coming. I think everybody should take a look on some front-end development also, and moving more to full stack kind of working. So today, we won't talk about this topic. I have already some other webinars about this, how to prepare for this change. So please take a look on them. They were also done for SUG Chennai. So you are free to check them. But it will be great if you can check them after this one, because it will help you also understand the things what I will talk, why I will talk about them, and so forth. So 3 topics: Sitecore Forms, Sitecore JSS, and how to work with them together. So Sitecore Forms, probably lots of you know Sitecore Forms were history, right? It started as a module that was called Web Forms for Marketers. We were using it for lots of years. Basically, it was introduced together with Sitecore 6. It was a separate module, so you had to install it on top of Sitecore. It was using web forms first, and then I think it was rewritten to use ASP.NET MVC. It was deprecated in Sitecore 9.1 because there was a new kit in the town introduced it was Sitecore Forms that were introduced with Sitecore 9.0. This module is part of Sitecore platform, so you don't need to install anything on top. It is basically part of it. And as I mentioned, it was it's a completely ready module. It's not anymore like it was with the web forms for marketers. It's a new one, but at the beginning there were a couple of issues with this module because more or less, if you compare the functionality between the web forms for marketers and the forms itself, or Sitecore Forms itself, even in version 9.3 of Sitecore, they were not on pair with the functionality. If we talk about save actions, as you can see on the left side, there were lots of save actions that you could use with web forms for marketers. With Sitecore Forms, you had only a couple of them. And basically, in the initial version of Sitecore Forms with Sitecore 9.0, you couldn't even send an email, which was a really not best experience. You had to build basically lots of these functionalities from scratch as a customization of the platform itself. Also, there were no modules or fields like reCAPTCHA, file upload, telephone or credit card fields, which the web forms for marketers had, for example. So we are talking about fields, save actions, and all of these things that were missing, but throughout the years, Sitecore added them to the Sitecore Forms. So now it's a really nice module or part of Sitecore, if we think about this way. It enables basically content editors to have similar kind of functionality that they are used to building pages, to build also forms. So basically, if you create a page, you add a form rendering or form component, you just specify the data source to be the form of your desire, and that's it basically. You can edit the form from the form builder, and it's pretty neat look and feel, and also the experience for content editors to create the forms in Sitecore with this approach. So we don't need to go somewhere else, use some third-party tool, but you can stay in Sitecore and create forms. Of course, as Sitecore is also going the direction that it's separating more and more services out of Sitecore itself. So it's not a monolith anymore, but you can basically pick the service of your choice. So basically you don't need to use Email Experience Manager for sending emails, but you can choose whatever service as you wish. Of course, also Sitecore Forms is something that you don't need to use. You can use some other tools, and then basically you can just specify or you can create your own renderings or components where content editors will just link it with the choice of tool for forms that you wish, and that's it, right? So you don't need to use Sitecore Forms, but it's a good thing because you are staying in the usual editors as you are used to, and you are staying with the platform itself. Web forms for marketers had a really weird look and feel. I remember working with them, so you had some kind of field definition where you were setting what was the type of the field. More or less from editing point of view, it was not back at those days, it was not that hard to create new forms and also to build this functionality for backend developers. But I think the most tedious work with web forms for marketers was for designers or for front-end editors, because to customize the CSS that was generated by web forms for marketers was really hard. I remember when, I think 7 years ago, we started to use web forms for marketers. Front-end developers were, just to say it nicely, were not so happy about that, right? They had to use lots of times the important, signature, and so forth. So yeah, it was like maybe not that hard to use for editors, but really hard to style at the end. That's why also Sitecore completely rewritten it, and yeah, Sitecore Forms were made. If you are still using web forms for marketers, then maybe it would be great once you are basically migrating to Sitecore Forms. You can use really nice tool created by Alessandro. It's a conversion tool. It's a console application that it can automate a solution for you to convert and migrate the web forms for marketers forms to Sitecore Forms, because of course it's not that easy to port web forms for marketers to Sitecore Forms, because they have different data sources, they have different structure, they have different kind of working, right, with them at the end. So yeah, this tool might come handy if you need. And the second one that I mentioned here, it's a Sitecore Forms extensions that was created by Bart. And it is also really nice because, as I mentioned previously, the Sitecore Forms were not on pair with Reference for Marketers, so there were some functionalities missing. That's why Bart created this module. At these days, I would say it's not needed anymore, or let's say not fully, because lots of functionalities that the module contained are obsolete now because they are part of the Sitecore Forms itself. But at least I would say it's really good to take a look on this GitHub repo, and it will show you how to create custom fields, how to structure the solution, and so forth. But of course, yeah, it's related to, I would say, MVC solutions. We will talk about JSS right today. So yeah, but still, I would say it's relevant for you if you need to create your own custom fields and so forth. So yeah, these two modules can come handy. So yeah, let's talk about JSS for now a bit, just to recap basically what I was talking about last time. So the JSS or Sitecore JavaScript SDK is basically a set of npm packages that enable you implementing Sitecore apps using the modern JavaScript frameworks. You can choose between various of them. It contains some core packages. It also has some framework-specific packages, so basically some packages related to React or Vue.js, and then also it has some starter apps, so some kind of code that you can use as a building blocks at the beginning of your project. So you don't need to, let's say, create your custom implementation from scratch just by using some npm packages, but you have already some code that you can use quickly. With JSS, you have two options or two programming styles. You have the code first or Sitecore first. With the code first, you create templates, renderings, contents, routes, and everything in basically Visual Studio Code or any editor of your choice. Then you import your JSS app, and that's it. And then you start building your components. With Sitecore first, you are doing as you are used to from usual Sitecore developer point of view. So you create all the Sitecore related things like templates, renderings, contents, and so forth in Sitecore, and then you build your components in Visual Studio Code. It's a matter of choice what you will choose. I would say Sitecore first is best, or at least we were solely using this on our projects, because of course with code first, it's sometimes, let's say, hard to do some customization. So Sitecore first was always first choice for us. Then with JSS, you have a couple of modes how you can develop or use Sitecore itself. You have the disconnected mode, where the front-end developer is completely developing everything without connection to Sitecore, hence the name disconnected mode. With the integrated, you are basically integrated with Sitecore, but this integrated mode is usually used only on CM or CD instances of Sitecore, where you are directly connected to Sitecore. You have all of the features as with the usual MVC development. So the experience editor is working, so you can edit in kind of what you see is what you get style of editor, right? With the connected mode, you are not using some mock data as with the disconnected mode, but you are already connected with Sitecore, reading values from layout service, getting the JSONs as usual, and so forth. Let's say for our purposes, in our projects, we are usually using the disconnected mode for front-end developers, and from the backend point of view, we are working in the same branch as with the front-end developers when we are creating a new functionality, and then we are doing some integration test where the backend changes and front-end changes are working together, and that's it. So with the disconnected, we are letting front-end developers work as they wish. They are mocking the data and everything, and we are just checking then at the end how it's working. The tooling, for me, I was used to working with Visual Studio. Then I more or less instantly changed to Visual Studio Code when I started to code more front-end and React code, but it's fine. It's not mandatory to use Visual Studio Code. You can also use Notepad++, Atom, or any other editor as you wish. It's good that if you can use on your projects also some linters, which are tools that can parse your code, compare it against some rules, and check, syntax errors or formatting or some good practice. So basically, you somehow force developers to code in similar manner. So if you are working on one component and then you need to do some bug fixing for your colleague on another component, you clearly see the similar structure, similar kind of coding, so you can much easier, get into the code or more quicker to get into the code than previously. Yeah, we are also using Prettier to also format the code similar way. So at the end, we are, not using sometimes double quotes, somewhere single quotes, and so forth. So yeah, we have similar kind of coding at the end. If you start a new project, it's really simple with the JSS. So these are 4 commands that you need to use. So first install the JSS CLI, then create your app. This is for React, as you can see, the last parameter. And then you cd to that folder that was created with the name of your project, and then you hit JSS start. This is basically how you start in the integrated mode. And then basically you can, the second command can be also changed, and you can add the B parameter to precisely, if you are not working in the last version of JSS, then you can specify which version you would like to have. You can also check my blog post for that. There are also a couple of things what you can do. For example, deploy only apps part or deploy the items during the development. And then you have some rule-based configuration. You can create either some settings that you can check on my blog, or you can also extend the layout service context object, and it will more or less just add some new JSON, and that's it. With Sitecore, the choice of your framework or library is on your shoulders. Sitecore already created SDK for 3 or 4 major front-end frameworks these days. So you can choose between the React or Next.js. If you wish to use also some server-side functionalities or some static site generation tools and so forth. So I would say Next.js is something that you should definitely look into, because also Sitecore is using Next.js on XM Cloud. So for you, it will be much easier to then move. Sitecore basically had to do some choice between these, and more or less React and Next.js are the ones which are majorly used these days. Vue.js is the second one, I would say, and Angular is somehow popular in some communities, in some not. So it's something like a, it's choice on you, right? Which way you will go. But also, if you check, for example, Stack Exchange, there are more questions about React and Next.js regarding Sitecore JSS. So looks like that those people are more using these frameworks. Then, about the documentation, you can also check my blog posts. You can also check the webinars, how to start with JSS and so forth. So, regarding Sitecore Forms and JSS, when you start working with Sitecore JSS, it's more or less something similar as you are used to with MVC. So what you need to do, you need to go to the field types, when you create the MVC, and you create a view path, or basically you create some HTML file on that, and that's it on the MVC, right? So you define a new field, you add basically a file, you put there some ASP.NET MVC code, and that's it. But with JSS, these kind of files will be omitted, right? They are only used for form builder. You won't see that the JSS is using it, and maybe you are asking why. Because for JSS, as with the other things, you need to create your own implementation, right? So as you are used to doing the implementation for the JSS renderings that you have created, for example, the carousel, footer, header, and all of those components, you need to do similar also for JSS. So each field that you will create or you will have in your solution needs to have a counterpart implementation on Sitecore JSS side. How this is working? So as you would expect, as with JSS and everything with JSS, the data are coming from layout service. So the browser itself, when you are opening a new form or page with the form, it's more or less accessing the layout service. Then the form service is called. It is generating fields for you, and then when somebody hits the submit button, it is more or less posting the data again to the form builder API, and it is getting the results. Basically, how this is working is that you are not validating the form fields on the front-end level, but they are validated on the server side level. This is, I would say, good and also bad practice, because the good thing is that there is only one place where you have the source of truth for the validation of the fields, right? So because usually how this was done, you were doing some validation on the front-end side, but of course, as some, let's say, advanced users or visitors were able to malfunction or put some specific code in your form, they could omit the validations. So still, you had to do some validation on server side. So that's why Sitecore probably thought about this already, and it is helping us. Like, you can also do the validation in your custom components, as I mentioned, on JSS side, but it doesn't, let's say, matter, or you don't need to do it anymore, right? You can just say that if it's validated on server side and everything's fine, then I'm submitting the form. But then, on the other hand, it is causing some trouble. For example, when we were implementing GDPR and we had to open a pop-up, like what you should do, because the pop-up should be only shown when the form is valid, right? But when you at the point of hitting the submit button, we didn't know whether the form is valid, or there are some fields which are which have some validation errors, right? So what we are currently doing is that we are artificially creating or adding some GDPR field, which when you hit first time the submit button, it is checking all of the fields that you have on the form, except of this one. And when this field is unvalidated, we are only showing that pop-up there, right? So only when all of the other fields are valid and the GDPR is not valid, then we are showing the pop-up. Which means, of course, that if you check in browser how many submit requests we are doing two of them, right? The first one will fail with 400 HTTP error code because more or less the GDPR failed, right? But all of the rest of the things are fine. So what we are doing in the GDPR component, we are then showing the pop-up, then doing submit once again, and then it's ending with 200 HTTP error code, so as it should be, more or less. When you would like to use Sitecore Forms with JSS, you of course need to install a specific JSS Forms package. You can find it here, or basically this is the command npm I Sitecore JSS Forms. It will install JSS package for you. After you do this, of course, you need to create your own implementation. There is also a documentation from Sitecore, how to do it, how to structure the solution, and so forth. But it's a matter of what's your solution, whether you are using the TypeScript or not. As you can see, we are using the TypeScript. We have done the implementation the way that we have Sitecore JSS form component. So basically, if you place a form on the page, this component is being rendered. Then this index.tsx is opened. I will show it in a sec. And then it is basically starting to rendering each subcomponent, or basically, if you think about it, each field that you have on the form, which you, as I mentioned before, you need to do your own implementation. How it is wired together. So this is basically the index.tsx. As you can see, it is using a couple of things from the package itself, right? So like JSS form data, form result, and so forth. As you can see, for the it has a couple of parameters. Basically, the fields are coming in the model itself. I will also show it in another slide. So let's keep it for now. We have the API key that is usually coming. We have the API host. We have the field factory, where in this field factory you are mapping the fields between the field type ID and the field you would like to show. Then you have field validation error components. So it's a validation component. Basically, it's usually something like a error message below the field itself, where it is saying like a zip code is not valid, or you have specified wrong phone number, and so forth. Then you have on redirect, we have a specific submit action that is handling this part also. So this is basically a simple implementation. There is also documentation by Sitecore how to implement this component with all of these fields. For example, this error component, as you can see, it's showing empty error component, which means that you have two types of errors. You have the field validation error, and then you have the error coming from, for example, submit action. So if you have some integration with CRM system, or you have, I don't know, GDPR, for example, or you have the save data, right, the out of the box. If something fails, it is showing this error component. We had requirement to not show any of these errors, right? So just to we are just logging them at the end in the in Sitecore log in application insights, and we are more or less not propagating anything on the front-end side. That was the requirement. That's why we are using the empty error component, but we are propagating the field validation errors, right, with this one. We have also a field wrapper because we had a requirement to have, for example, the styles to be either half of the screen width or third one or two-thirds and so forth. So we are using the field wrapper component for specifying some nice styling of the fields. This is the index.tsx file. Then we have the field types, which you can find here under the types folder. Here you are specifying your custom fields. As I mentioned, when you are building your JSS application for forms, you have some out-of-the-box fields that you need to map, and you have also some custom fields. So in this field.types.ts, we are specifying the custom ones, where we are specifying the name, ID, and we are using these S-type field types, which is helping us in terms of TypeScript. So it's not, showing any error, because by example that you can see in SDK, it is without these S field types. So it's only that name, colon, and this ID. With these S field types, it will pass through TypeScript validations for you. So here we are defining the custom field types, and then how it is wired together. You have the field factory here, and then here you are defining or you are importing the components that you have, and then you are mapping them more or less with the set component, right? So we say to the JSS that for single line text, show it as a text field. For number field, show it as a number field component that you have in your solution. For email, use email field, right? And so forth. And then for the custom ones, so defined in these field types, you also do the same. You can either have custom components, like for example for the country state field, or you can use the, let's say, out of the box ones, but more or less it's only your implementation of the out of the box ones, right? And then this is basically how it is wired together. So you have the, for example, under the components, you have the page URL field where you are defining it here, right? And then you say that for page URL file type item ID, show or use page URL component. JSS Forms package leverages the Forms service REST API, as I mentioned. So it's not directly calling Sitecore, but it's using Forms service REST API for that. It's framework agnostic, so doesn't matter whether you are calling it from Angular or Vue.js or React. It's working for all of them. As you can see, there are also lots of other services. With JSS, we are usually talking about layout service. We are talking about dictionary service, but also in this case we are using the form service. You can also check the link that I pasted below. Then how it's looking or how it is working. You are doing REST API or Sitecore JSS SDK is doing it for you basically. So it's calling the form builder with some ID that was coming in the layout service response, and this is how it looks like, right? So for example, if you have some validation errors, you can see that for this field with this ID, there is an error in a reCAPTCHA. There is also some zip code that is required that was not specified. For country state selector, probably somebody specified the country, but not the state, right? So please specify state and so forth. So this is how the validation errors are coming. And as I mentioned, basically how this is working, JSS is taking the error, the validation error, it's pushing it to the field, right? And then you will see the error itself through this component that you specify in the index.tsx file. Then, as you can see, I was mentioning the errors. So this is the object for, let's say, more cautious or more system one errors, I would say. So not field validation errors, but something that is coming from submit actions, right? And then you have the next form object where you have the fields, for example. We will check it here. So this is how it is wired together. So as I mentioned, you have the custom field types, right? This is basically under the fields. You have a list of all of the fields that you have on the form. As you can see, this is the first one, second one, and there were 15 or how many in my example. Then each field contains, as you can see, index field, value field, and also the field ID. But basically the most crucial for JSS to wire things up together is the model object, where it has the field type item ID, right? In this case, it's a 75 whatever. It knows that for this one, it is mapping first name field type item ID because it's the same, and it will use the text field component, right? So for example, for the next field, if it has a different ID, it will map it for also similar way. So through the field types and then for the field mapping, it will wire things up nicely for you. This is example of one of the components that we have created. This is the base text field. Basically, this text field that I mentioned here, it's only inheriting it. It's more or less the same. So this is the simple implementation on the React side. So we have the functional component. We have here some functions like onFocus, onBlur, onChange. As you can see, it is changing the value field, which we have seen here. This is the value field, right? It is specifying it, right? So here it is setting the value. Then in the return, it's really simple div with some label and input, right? And you are more or less just mapping the things from the props that are coming from model. So as you can see, really simple. From model title, there is a label, right? So we are mapping the label itself to this model.title. So at the end, model.title is the first name. So this is what will be the legend or the label or the input. There will be a text, right? So this is how the things are wired together between the JSS and the form builder and the service itself. And then there is a simple input. We are specifying what type it is. We are also getting it from the props, as you can see. Yeah, and So if something changes, right, we are reacting to it with the onChange method. We are setting the value, and also we are setting the value field. Then we have the label and we have the input, and then we are using the field validation errors component, which is coming from props, this one, and we are pushing props, right? So it will know that it needs to read the field validation errors, right, from this object, and it will know that it needs to map the field value error to that field validation error. So this is how also this is working on the JSS side. So for each field, you need to have this kind of mapping, and you need to have a corresponding component. So it's pretty easy to add new fields and new field definitions. This is also one example for the checkbox field. As you can see, it's pretty similar to the one that we have seen before. It also has an input, but this time it's a type of checkbox, of course, and more or less it has similar definition, right? And also similar methods, onChange, onBlur, onFocus, right? But this time the label is on the bottom of the checkbox because you want to have some text below the checkbox usually to increase the readability of the field itself. So we were talking about the view path. So basically the view path in the sense of how it is used for Sitecore JSS and Forms It's only used on the form builder. You won't see it anywhere else. Then we have the model type. You can either use the out-of-the-box ones, or you can create your own. If you can find all of the out-of-the-box ones in the Sitecore Experience Forms MVC assembly, and there is also namespace .models.fields where you can find all of these. You can also inspire, but don't forget that there is a serializable attribute, and we will talk about that later in the next slides. Why it is necessary. Okay, let's take a look on some demo. Quickly, or maybe not. What is happening? Okay, I'm missing languages. Okay, then. Okay, I cannot show you anything. Gosh, something went wrong. I need to check. Sorry for that. But yeah, basically, what we are talking about is these settings, forms, field types. Then we have these fields. We have the view paths here. We have the model types here, and then you have the property editor. The property editor is responsible for the fields that you can see on the right side of your screen when you open the form builder. Unfortunately, I cannot open it now because I cannot see any form. But yeah, I will definitely create some blog post, and you will see some more details about this. But basically, the property editor is responsible to see some properties for each field. So, for example, you can specify name of the field, label, default value, styling, and yeah, all of these things. But yeah, as I mentioned, basically this one you don't need to use for JSS because the implementation itself is done on the front end side. So you are just responsible to map it correctly. Okay, let's get back here. So I have also a blog post about creating some custom sections in the form builder. So and please check it regarding some customization or some changes that we did. The second I will push this to another screen. We had some trouble on the infra level because we have some really strict rules what kind of data can be sent by the post method, and on the higher environments we were always getting some errors, and basically the app service was thinking, or more application gateway I would say, would be thinking that we are some intruders and we are trying to do some SQL injection. So what we had to do, we had to use the base 64 string as a value of some of the fields that we were creating. For example, we were sending a reCAPTCHA token, or we were sending some GDPR related things, and we also didn't want it to, let's say, show it. So on the JSS side, what we have done, we are calling the byte to array function, which is converting the string to byte 64 string, and then we are also encoding it. So any white spaces or any special characters like equals will be changed to the encoded URI. And then on the backend side, when we are reading the values from the field itself, we are doing, let's say, opposite, right? So first we are decoding the URL. So again, making the strings encoded, yeah. And then we are converting base 64 string to string. So it's again another conversion. With this approach, we can send basically any data between the form itself and Sitecore backend. We have done it for example, the page URL because it contains some specific characters, and also for reCAPTCHA token, this was needed. So just a reminder. I was talking about serializable. So when you are creating your own custom view models, don't forget that you need to include the serializable attribute. it already contains in this inherited class, and basically in any class that Sitecore has out of the box for out of the box fields. But unfortunately, the serializable attribute is not inherited, and that's because the inherited is set to false on the serializable attribute itself, if you are asking. So yeah, we have lots of times everything was working locally, but when we deployed it to test environment or QA environment or basically any higher environment, we started to get some serious errors from forms, like 500 HTTP codes were sent back as errors, and we were trying to figure out why. And then we saw a message that the reCAPTCHA view model is not serializable. Right, so it was evident what is wrong. So please pay attention when you are creating your own custom fields or custom also view models for those fields. Then you need to put the serializable attribute. So I would say, just to wrap things up, so we have also some time for some questions. Check my blog post about some JSS learning resources. Sorry for the demo that I had some trouble with the form builder. I don't know what happened, but I will definitely create a blog post, and you will have the knowledge that I wanted to show you. So if there are any questions, I'm open to answer them.
Yeah, Peter, I have one question. Yeah, Mitesh here.
Hi, Mitish.
Yeah. So actually, what happens in our previous project, we have integrated. So I have done one POC for that, and I have tried to integrate the forms in my applications. But I'm facing issue when I'm submitting the forms. So using Experience Editor, I can able to submit the forms. But when I tried to submit using my that localhost or any other, like I hosted that application, but I'm getting like cross origins and I'm getting some error. I cannot able to submit that form. So is there any require some changes from any Next.js applications or Sitecore N?
I would say it's really hard to, let's say, answer this kind of question. I would definitely say that it would be great if you can create a question on Stack Exchange, because it needs, let's say, some more information. Maybe there is some configuration error that the form builder, that basically you cannot call the form builder API from your Sitecore JSS. I would suspect this could be like a root cause for your issue, because if it's working in Experience Editor, that means that the Sitecore itself can call the form builder, but your application probably is and maybe it has some problem with the API key or this kind of thing.
Yeah, so because I'm getting anti-forgery token is not present, and I have checked that anti-forgery token was there, but somehow I cannot able to submit that form using that front-end application.
Yeah, I would definitely, create that question on Stack Exchange, and I think somebody can help you, maybe even me.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I will post that one.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really hard to answer, because for us it was working after some initial setup. So might be that you have missed something from documentation or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Uh, yes, hi Manoj this side, Peter.
Hello. Yep.
Yeah. So just want to confirm, like, is it possible to use Sitecore JSS form with the GraphQL layout, or is it mandatory to use a REST layout service only?
We have used REST API service, and I think for if you wish to use GraphQL, I think it shouldn't be a problem, right, to get let's say the data about the fields and so forth. But for submitting, you definitely need to use the form builder API. Without that, I think it wouldn't be possible, because you need to somehow send the data, right? As I mentioned, the validation of the form is done on server side. So for that, you need to call Form Builder API. And to be honest, we are not using GraphQL on our project. So yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Good question.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. If we don't have any other questions, then thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
To work with Sitecore Forms with JSS and React. It was a wonderful, detailed, and informative session for us. And thanks everyone for attending this session. Have a nice day and rest of the evening.
You too. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. See you soon.
Take care.
Bye.